Good morning.
Good morning.
And I think I can say omedetou gozaimasu, congratulations to the Chicago Church on this Tenchi Kane no Kami Grand Ceremony. When Takeuchi Sensei asked me to give the sermon on this auspicious occasion, I was of course very honored, but also very surprised and taken aback. After all, I'm not a minister, nor am I used to giving sermons, although my husband would probably say, yeah, but you sure lecture a lot. So, maybe it's the same thing, I don't know. I think it's not the same thing, but Sensei suggested that I share some of my personal experiences in the Konko faith, especially how I came to be a Konko believer. And I thought, well, that I can do. And as I thought about what I might talk about, I decided I also wanted to tie my story, what I was going to say, to one of my favorite teachings. I think, we all have, I don't know the teachings, there's a large volume, but there's some that, one hears from time to time, and there's one that I like in particular, which is, 疑いを離れて広き誠の大道を開きによ、我が身は神徳の中に生かされてあり. Now, I know it's translated somewhere. I couldn't find the English, and so I tried it translating it on my own. So this is not an official translation, and there's parts of it that don't really work for me, but something like this. Banish doubt, open your eyes, and look upon the great boundless path of truth and sincerity. You are already living in the midst of divine virtue. Now, that already is actually very much not in the original, but the sense of it in the Japanese and in English is that you're don't worry, you're already living in divine virtue. This is a teaching that has helped me more than once through my life. Okay, I'm trying to get this to scroll here. Oops, it's not scrolling. Why don't you want to scroll? Okie dokie. Sorry, I hope I don't have a frozen screen. No, that's not it either, sorry. There we go, okay. What it said to me was, and continues to say to me, is stop worrying, okay? You're making so many requests, asking to receive blessings for this and that, but stop and look around you. You're already receiving so many divine blessings. And the reason this teaching spoke to me is that I'm a worrier, okay? I tend to worry about everything. Oh, is this ready? Is that ready? Oh, did I turn off the gas? Did all this? And I tend to worry about everything. So the phrase is especially banish doubt, leave doubt, let go of doubt. And you're already living in the midst of divine virtue, meaning that you're already receiving so many blessings. Really helped me to stop fretting about things and to trust Kami-sama more. It's not all, I'm not all there yet. I still worry, but it does help. It helps to untie the knots in my stomach, from time to time. So, what just in general, what are some of these blessings? Well, I think I don't really need to go through a whole lot of detail here, but I just thought, well, every day without fail, the sun rises, a new day begins. Whether I worry about it or not, that happens. We have seasons, different kinds of seasons depending on where in the world you're living. I was noticing as Sensei drove me, and picked me up from the hotel, etc. It's I was last in Chicago in February, so there wasn't much green. It was very brown, the branches, but it's beautifully green, and it's still spring, right? End of May, it's still spring, and so it's a fresh green. It's sort of a yellow tinged green, a little bit different from summer. I was here, 2018, I think there was a conference here, and it was also very green then, but it was a much darker green because it was summertime. Anyway, but the seasons that give us a renewal of life every year. Our bodies, my goodness, the billions and billions of cells that are doing one very specific job that keeps us alive. And so if even one cell stops doing its job, the consequences can be quite catastrophic. I don't worry about it. I don't have to worry about it, but it happens, digestion, and I don't mean to gross anyone out, but if you think about it, it's nothing short of a miracle that our bodies can take in food, turn it into fuel and the nutrients that we need, and they get rid of the waste material that the body does not need nor want. I mean, do we ever think to thank Kami-sama for example, allowing us to have bowel movements? I mean, that's really important, right? Okay. So these are just some of the many, many blessings that surround us every minute of every day. Blessings that we usually don't even think about, and so don't think to thank Kami-sama for, unfortunately. But I also thought about this teaching in a slightly different way. That is, in the sense of being surrounded by blessings that we couldn't have known at the time that were blessings, but when we look back, we see that Kami-sama was actually taking really good care of us and giving us incredible blessings after all. Now, this happens a little more, you younglings here, when you get to a certain age and start to look back on our lives like yours truly. So it'll come, okay, for you too. But you do start looking back and you think, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it, and then you start connecting the dots, So let me tell you how I came to be a Konko believer. My faith has come to me through my mother and her mother, my grandmother, and they're both, excuse me, I should say that my grandmother is originally from Wakayama Prefecture in Japan. It's actually, I don't know if you know the Japanese geography, but it's not very far from Osaka area, and that, the Kansai area tends to have a lot of believers, Konko believers. Anyway, that's where she first became a Konko believer. So in that sense, I'm a third generation believer who sort of grew up in the faith. But in another sense, I feel like I'm actually fairly new to Konko-kyo because I took a very, very long detour before coming back to this faith. My family, I was born in Japan. My family immigrated from Japan in the early 1950s. I know, most of you are not even twinkles in your father's eyes, okay? My father, my mother, my grandmother, the one from Wakayama, my younger sister, and me, so the five of us. We came here in order to be united with my grandfather, my mother's father, who was a more typical Issei, first-generation immigrant, and who had been forcibly removed from the West Coast and imprisoned in the government so-called camps, along with 120,000 other Japanese and Japanese Americans during World War II. We believe it was he was first, registered or signed in or whatever at Rower, Arkansas. Then he went to Tule Lake and then Manzanar. We think, and of course I was too young to care, and so I didn't get it all down, and I'm kicking myself for it now. But anyway, after moving around a little bit, we settled in San Gabriel. Now, I don't know how well you know Southern California, but it's a suburb of Los Angeles, about 10 or so miles east of Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. There were a few other Japanese American families in the area, but not that many. And by the way, that whole area, if you've heard at all, has since become a major hub of Chinese immigration and also Korean, but not at that time. One of those Japanese American families, by the way, was the Takeda family. I don't know if you know any of them, but basically my sister and I grew up with the Takeda girls, as they call them. Now they're known as Kimi Seki Maki Arakawa, and some of you may know Tomi Akari of the Portland Church. So we sort of grew up together. Like most of the other Japanese Americans in the area, I was enrolled for first grade. Sorry, I went too far. Come on down, come on back. I was enrolled for first grade in the local public school. Something happened during that first year, and my parents pulled me out of that school. I have no memory whatsoever of why this happened. And I don't know to this day if there was some sort of maybe racial incident, I don't know. It was not that long after the end of the Second World War, so feelings among some people are still very high. Or perhaps my parents just didn't like the school, or what. But the upshot was that starting in the second grade, I was sent to a Catholic school that was very close to our house. We would see the students in the uniform walking to and from school. One thing my parents said later was that the so-called mission schools, that is Catholic and also Christian schools in general in Japan, had very good reputations in Japan for academic rigor and discipline. So that may or may not have had something to do with the move, but that's how I ended up at a Catholic school. In any case, I found myself the lone non-Catholic child in a Catholic parochial school being taught by nuns. And when you're that age, that's what, 7, 8, I think, in second grade, the most important thing in life is to be like everyone else and not be different, okay? It was bad enough that I was the only ethnic Japanese, no other Asians at all, of course, in the area at the time, but I was the only ethnic Japanese in a school with only Caucasian and Hispanic students. I was also the only non-Catholic. I wasn't even a Christian, okay, of any sort. So, of course, what did I do? I told my parents that I wanted to be baptized a Catholic. You can imagine how this shocked my mother and grandmother. My father, by the way, probably wasn't all that, he didn't, I don't want to say he didn't care. I mean, he cared, but it probably was not such a big deal to him. Though he had joined the Konko Church of Hollywood, that was Goto Sensei, I don't know if you know his name, with my mother and grandmother. While living in Japan, my father was Japanese. I imagine that he had the usual Japanese tolerance for and sort of a committal attitude toward religion. They're very tolerant, they do everything. So I'm sure he participated in both Buddhist rites as necessary and Shinto ceremonies as necessary, especially the festivals. My grandfather, my mother's father, the one who spent the war years in the camps, he used to be Salvation Army. That's a Christian group. And he had gone, they say Salvation Army, so they're various, instead of like, I don't know, monsignors and bishops and things like that, they have military titles like captain of this and major such and such. He had gone up kind of, into a sort of middle level of leadership. But he changed to Konko Kyo. And Goto Sensei used to tell this story all the time, which is that one day your grandfather came in and sat right there. I mean, on the floor he sat, okay? And he said, I'm Salvation Army, I'm, et cetera, I'm Christian. But I would like to start coming to this church, Konko Kyo, because he said it's not good to have two different religions in the same household. So that was my grandfather. Anyway, I have no idea what he thought about my insistence that I be baptized. But certainly my mother and grandmother were just probably shocked and aghast. My mother immediately consulted the head minister, who was Goto Sensei, about my request. He discouraged it. He said, I don't think that's such a good idea. But I guess I kept asking and insisting, because next my mother consulted Fukuda Sensei at the San Francisco Church. I don't know if you've heard that name before, but he was called Bishop Fukuda at the time. Today he would be called the Chief Administrative Minister or the CAM, but he was highly respected, a charismatic leader, minister, and highly, highly respected, truly a leader of the Konko Church in North America. And the answer he gave, which was relayed to me much later by my mother, has always stayed with me. He said, this, quote, sort of, paraphrasing here, this is a Christian country. And I think he meant, culturally, not that everybody follows the Christian faith faithfully. I wish they would, but anyway. So I think it will be much easier for your daughter to make her way in this society if she became a Christian. So I think it's fine for her to be baptized. No matter how many times I recall this story, I'm astonished by it. Because can you imagine a high-ranking minister of any religion saying it's okay to switch to another faith, But such was and is, I think, the tolerance and respect for other faiths that is a hallmark of Konko. So I became Catholic and spent something like 12 years as a really, really hard, dyed-in-the-wool Catholic. One of the nuns who taught us once said, "What are you doing, trying to become more Catholic than the Pope?" And she was right, you know. Now, just to sort of, I don't want to go on too much longer, but eventually in my first or second year of college, of course it was college, I grew very disillusioned with the Catholic Church, and I left. Now, just to clarify, I've always said that it wasn't God that I disagreed with, but the institution of the Catholic Church. It's got a lot of problems. And so for the next maybe 20 years or more, I don't recall exactly, but I considered myself to have no religion at all. That was an attitude that really upset my mother very much. Of course, I understand that, but it was unfortunate. Still, excuse me. I sort of kept in touch with Konko. As a child, I went, when you're a child and your parents say, okay, time to go to monthly services, get in the car, of course you have no choice, you go. I played with the Takeda girls usually and maybe didn't sit through the services. But, even in college, when I considered myself, so in other words, I sort of grew up in the faith in that sense, just being there, the way children are just here and not necessarily praying, not necessarily thinking or learning, but you're there. And even in college, when I considered myself to have no religion at all, I still maintained, I think, a respectful attitude, or at least I'd like to think of myself as maintaining a respectful attitude toward Konko. Not when I was a teenager, but later. Partly because of my grandmother and mother. I also willingly participated in various special services like, memorial services and such, and knew that whenever I had a trip planned, for example, my mother did otodoke, to church, sought mediation, and then afterwards, if it was a really big trip or something, or some significant thing that I was doing, well, of course, then we did the oreimai afterwards, a visit of thanks. Okay. And when my father couldn't or wouldn't drive them to Gardena for services, I did. I took on that job whenever it was necessary. So my return to Konko was gradual. There was no, I don't know if you understand the reference, Saul of Tarsus, St. Paul moment, okay? For those of you who understand the reference, there was no lightning bolt that hit me and threw me off a horse, which is apparently what happened to Saul of Tarsus. But anyway, not even an aha moment. I truly don't recall. I think it was just an accumulation of the influence of my mother and grandmother, even after her death in 1985, maybe especially after her death, I don't know. I do believe in the workings of the Mitama, but both of whom had very, very strong faiths, and they talked to each other about it, though they would talk to me, but very diplomatically and very carefully. Scared to death of offending me and turning me against, the faith. Well, teenagers, right? I mean, if you say black, they immediately say white, just for no reason. And if you say white, they'll say black, so that was me. And they told stories of faith practices that had resulted in great blessings, as well as examples of irreverences that had some unfortunate results. So I'm hearing all this, right, as I grew older. So, but as I did grow older and went on to college and studied the Japanese language, literature, and culture as my specialization, I also developed a sort of an intellectual or almost a scholarly interest in this faith, given what to me were some very interesting teachings in comparison to what I knew about Western Christianity, and also what felt to me were some very Japanese features of Konko. It really is hard to say how and when and how exactly I came back to Konko, but I did. One milestone moment in my own mind was the KCNA conference of 2000. which was a joint conference with the Konko Missions of Hawaii. Yeah, that was held in Hilo. Oh, I mean, that right there was an attraction. Need to go. I had to go. And that's when Konko-sama came. The fifth Konko-sama came. I had taken earlier that year, so that was, I think it was August. You know, as you know, it's usually the summertime in 2000. But I had taken a new sort of a higher position at a different university that was to start in the fall, and having lived for years with my mother, doing the otodoke, she's going on a trip to Japan and does the otodoke, and then when I come back, the orei mairi, etc. It was sort of, part of my universe, part of my life, and so I determined that the best way to start this new job would be to attend the conference, which was being held. It was Hilo. It was great, by the way. And one of the most moving moments of my life was attending the opening service with Konko-sama leading the prayers in English. He spoke excellent English, excellent English. So that I still remember that. But anyway, like I said, there was no singular moment, but I did come back. And over the years, I've been able to do some goyo that I hope has been useful to people. And so when I think back, so when you get to a certain point in your life and you're looking back, I realize maybe it's all sort of all connected. My mother, a few years before she passed away, she said something really astonishing to me. Okay, this is the woman that I had probably given heartbreak and tears to because I said I wanted to become a Catholic. She said, I'm glad you became a Catholic. She said, I'm glad you spent that time. And I said, what? Why? She said, because as a Catholic, you learned how to pray. Okay, you learned how to pray. I might add to that I feel that what I just learned about the church history and the doctrines, whatever they were, and I'm not going to, I'm not here to talk about Catholic doctrine or Christian doctrine or anything to do with that, but just what I knew has really helped me because I take a comparative approach to a lot of things. The best way to understand this is to compare it with this, and that's been really useful to me. I've also done some translating for KCNA, and in doing the translating, obviously I'm very careful not to use terms that could be sort of sound a little bit too close to Christian terms and all that, because we don't want there to be any confusion. But all of that informs my work, and it's really, really helpful. And so I'm thinking, wow, decades ago, Kami-sama knew what was what, and maybe it was done for a reason, and a blessing that nobody realized was a blessing. I'm sure it just upset the whole family. And she had to go and consult, Bishop Fukuda in San Francisco. But it's only afterwards that you look back and think, oh my goodness, wow, therefore banished out. Look at the world, look at the beautiful world around you. You're already living in divine blessings. So anyway, that's my story. So thank you very much for your attention. Take it and do with it whatever you'd like. Okay, thank you so much.